After spending a lot of time in Da Nang over the years, I've visited Hoi An more times than I can count. But to be honest, I never seriously considered staying here long term. To me, it always felt overcrowded and very touristy, almost like an open-air museum you visit for a day or two and then leave. But recently, that perspective started to shift. The more time I spend here, and the more people I meet who stay longer, the more I understand why some choose this place. So in this video, I want to show you a more complete picture of Hoi An. Not just what it looks like, but what it actually feels like to spend time here. I will walk you through not only the lifestyle, prices, food, co-working scene, and which neighborhoods foreigners mainly prefer to stay in, but also what daily life really looks like beyond the surface. And more importantly, the downsides that a lot of people don't really talk about. This is not another tourist guide. This is about the reality of Hoi An and whether it really makes sense to stay here longer. Let's get into it. But before we go deeper into the details, there's an obvious question. Why would anyone even consider living in this small town in Vietnam? And to be fair, there are a few strong reasons for that. Hoi An makes a very strong first impression. The lanterns, the colorful buildings, the old wooden houses, the narrow streets. The overall look of the town feels very unique. It really does feel like you've stepped into a movie. Everything looks carefully preserved, almost frozen in time, and it's easy to understand why the entire old town is protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Even though it's quite small, with a population of under 150,000, it still seems to offer everything you need for a longer stay and a comfortable life. The beach is just a short ride away, clean and relaxed, with plenty of cafes and restaurants. And just outside the center, you have rice fields stretching in every direction. It's quiet, open, and feels completely different from the old town, with lots of small cafes where people sit, read, or work while enjoying the green views. Another thing that stands out is the mix of people here. The locals are incredibly skilled, and you'll come across artists, tailors, and craftsmen who are often happy to share a bit about what they do. That mix of cultures actually has deep roots. Back in the 17th century, Japanese merchants settled here and even built the famous covered bridge to connect their area with the Chinese quarter. Around the same time, Chinese traders brought their own architecture, assembly halls, and traditions, which are still very visible today. Over time, all of this blended together and created the unique look and atmosphere Hoi An is known for now. Of course, there are a lot of tourists, but you also see long-term expats, retirees, and some digital nomads. Over the years, that international community has been growing. You notice it in the number of yoga studios, gyms, healthy cafes, co-working spaces, and places built around a slower, more relaxed lifestyle. It's not surprising that for many people, Hoi An feels like a place where you could easily stay longer. When it comes to where to stay in Hoi An, the old town is usually the first place people think about. And yes, it's beautiful, but living there is a completely different experience. It gets extremely crowded, especially in the evenings. At times, it's so packed that even crossing a small bridge can take a few minutes. It's not really something you want to deal with every single day. Most foreigners end up staying a bit outside of that area. One of the most popular spots is Tan Than, near An Bang Beach. It has a very relaxed beach town feel, with plenty of cafes, bars, and restaurants built around an international crowd. It's social, easygoing, and feels much more livable than the old town, while still being close enough to visit whenever you want. Another area that stands out is Cam Chau. It sits between the old town and the beach, and for many people, it's the most balanced option. You get a quieter environment, often with views of rice fields, and at the same time, everything is just a short bike ride away. It feels more local, more peaceful, and much better suited for a daily routine, especially if you're working remotely or just want a slower pace. Now, when it comes to finding a place long-term, this is where things get a bit tricky. If you check Booking or Airbnb for monthly stays, prices can look surprisingly high, not really what you expect from Vietnam. That's mainly because most listings are short-term rentals, and options are limited since it's a small town. In reality, most long-term rentals are found through Facebook groups, but even there, it's not always easy. Demand has been growing quickly over the past few years, and good places don't stay available for long. You might see something you like, and a few hours later it's already gone. What usually works better is posting your own request in those groups. Landlords and agents will reach out directly, and you often get more options that way. Also, you don't really need to worry about agent fees here. In most cases, the landlord pays the commission, not the tenant. One thing to keep in mind is moisture and mold, especially on lower floors, since Hoi An is in a flood-prone area. I'll talk more about that in a minute. In terms of prices, accommodation here is generally a bit higher compared to Da Nang, but you can still find a nice, comfortable place in the range of 10 to 12 million per month, which is roughly $400 to $500. Of course, there are more expensive options, but this is a realistic range for a good long-term stay in Hoi An. Food is one of the best parts of being in Hoi An. There's a really nice mix of international restaurants and local spots, so you don't feel limited at all. Places like Morning Glory or the Grandma Kitchen are popular for a reason. Good food, nice atmosphere, and prices that still feel fair for what you get. At the same time, some of the best meals are in small local restaurants hidden in quieter streets. Simple dishes like kam tam or mi kwang are fresh, filling, and part of everyday life here. That's usually where you end up going more often without even planning it. Prices can vary quite a bit. A local meal might cost around 50 to 70,000, while more Western style or nicer places usually sit somewhere between 100 and 150,000. And if you feel like going for something more upscale, there's really no limit on how much you can spend. If you cook at home, there are plenty of supermarkets around town, but local markets are usually the better option. Fresh products are available every morning, and prices are generally low. Just take your time, ask for prices, and if needed, use a translator so you don't overpay. I actually enjoy going to these markets. It's a nice way to interact with locals and just observe the whole scene around you. If you want more details about Hoi An, I've actually put everything on my blog along with some pictures I find interesting. I'll leave the link in the description. By the way, I built that website by myself using Bluehost, and honestly, it was way easier than I expected. I just signed up, got a domain, and set everything up in just a few clicks. If you're thinking about starting your own blog, you can check it out through my link or scan this QR code. It supports the channel at no extra cost for you. If you work remotely, Hoi An is a very easy place to settle into. In that sense, it feels a bit similar to Chiang Mai. You don't really spend time searching for places to work. They're everywhere. A lot of people come here to focus, work on their projects, meet like-minded people, and at the same time enjoy the slower pace and the coffee scene. Starting with co-working spaces, there are some really solid options in town. Places like Hub Hoi An or FIFO Flow are popular for a reason. They're affordable, around 350,000 for a daily pass and roughly 4 million per month depending on the season. And the internet is reliable. You get a mix of people from all over the world, some staying short-term, others for a few months, all working on their own things. The atmosphere is focused but still social in a natural way. Some of these places even overlook rice fields, so you're working with a really calm view around you. You can also rent things like a second screen or use quiet rooms for calls if you need to. That said, a lot of people don't even use co-working spaces here. The cafe scene is strong enough on its own. Coffee shops in Hoi An are taken seriously. There's a lot of competition, so places really try to stand out, both in design and in coffee quality. If you're not into co-working spaces, you can easily build your whole routine around cafes. A cup of specialty coffee is usually around 50 to 70,000, while a simple Vietnamese coffee like Cafe Den or Cafe Suada is closer to 25 to 35. Overall, it's affordable, and the quality is consistently good. Internet speeds can vary a bit. It's still Vietnam, so the infrastructure isn't always as stable as in places like Thailand. But in most cases, it's more than enough to get your work done. By the way, if you're working from public Wi-Fi, it's a good idea to use a VPN to keep your data safe, especially when logging into accounts or making payments. I personally use NordVPN. It's fast, easy to use, and works with one click. I usually turn it on when I'm in cafes just to be safe. This video isn't sponsored, but if you use my link in the description or scan the QR code, I'll get a small commission at no extra cost to you. Getting around Hoi An is pretty simple, but you won't really be using public transport. Inside the town, it basically doesn't exist. There is a bus from Da Nang that runs regularly, but once you're here, you'll be relying on other options. Most people use Grab, which is the local version of Uber, or they rent a scooter. That's the most common way to get around. Personally, I don't ride scooters, so I usually rent a bicycle as soon as I arrive. It's actually a great option here. A full-day rental is cheap, and the town is small enough that you can reach almost everything by bike. Traffic might look a bit chaotic at first, but drivers are used to cyclists, so it feels safer than you'd expect. And honestly, cycling here is part of the experience. Riding through the rice fields and moving between quiet streets, it's peaceful and simple. It's also a really nice way to explore the area while getting a bit of exercise at the same time. You can rent a bike for as little as $50,000 per day, around $2, which is totally worth it. Walking around the old town is something I'd never really get tired of. Even if it's the same streets, the same galleries, the same tailor shops, there's still something about the atmosphere. The old buildings, the small details, the people creating things right in front of you. It feels alive in a very different way. But that feeling changes quite quickly once you stay longer. Outside of the main tourist areas, especially after the morning hours, the town becomes very quiet, almost too quiet. There isn't much of that real city energy, and not a lot happening on a daily basis. Hoi An doesn't push you to be active, it slows you down. At first, that feels great. You relax more, you take your time, you enjoy simple moments. Sitting in a quiet cafe, watching the river, meeting a friend, or just focusing on work without distractions. But over time, that slower pace can start to feel limiting, especially if you're used to a more active lifestyle or a stronger social rhythm. That said, once you feel like going out, there are still plenty of bars and pubs in the old town. You'll find live music, local bands, and good spots to socialize. Just try to go a bit later in the evening, after most of the tourist crowds leave, otherwise it can feel quite crowded. Then there's An Bang Beach, which is a big part of the lifestyle here. It's much calmer and less crowded compared to the main beach in Da Nang, and people really take their time there. Sitting by the water, watching the waves, doing nothing for a while. It fits perfectly with the overall pace of the town. In other words, if you're that type of person, this can be a really good place to stay longer. Hoi An might look like a cheap place to live, but the reality is a bit different. It's not expensive in a global sense, but compared to places like Da Nang, prices here are noticeably higher. A big part of that comes from tourism and the fact that you simply have fewer options. Accommodation is the first thing you notice. Short-term stays are often overpriced, especially close to the old town or near the beach. Even for longer stays, prices are usually higher than what you'd expect for a town this size. Food is still affordable, but not as cheap as many people expect in Vietnam. A simple local meal might cost around $50,000, but in more central areas, it's easy to pay closer to $100 or even $150 without really noticing. Western-style meals or nicer restaurants usually sit somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000 per person, sometimes more. Coffee follows the same pattern. Local coffee is still cheap, around $25,000 to $35,000, but most of the cafes people end up going to charge a bit more than what you'd see in other cities. You're often paying for the space, the design, and the overall experience. Going out is also a bit more expensive. A local Huda beer in a bar is usually around $40,000 to $50,000, and cocktails often sit somewhere between $150 and $200, sometimes even higher depending on the place. Even small daily things add up. A basic laundry service, for example, is usually around $30,000 per kilo, which is slightly higher than in nearby cities. Overall, you're not spending a lot here, but you are paying a bit of a premium for the atmosphere. That's really the best way to understand Hoi An. It looks simple, but the pricing tells a slightly different story. Hoi An has a few downsides that are easy to miss at first. The town is small, and after a while, you really start to feel it. The same streets, the same routes, the same rhythm every day. What feels charming in the beginning slowly turns into routine, and that sense of discovery fades quicker than you expect. There's also the practical side of daily life. Simple things can take more effort here. You have fewer options, less variety, And sometimes you need to plan ahead instead of just stepping outside and finding everything nearby. It's not a deal breaker, but it does shape your day-to-day life. The weather is another factor. Long periods of heat and humidity are normal, and during the rainy season, flooding becomes something you actually have to think about. Some areas of the town are prone to flooding, especially closer to the river. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it can affect daily life quite a bit. Streets can fill with water, and some ground floor spaces get affected. It's also something to keep in mind when looking for a place, as issues like humidity or mold are not uncommon after the rainy season. Socially, it can feel a bit limited as well. You do meet people, but the circle is smaller, and it's easy to fall into the same patterns. If you're someone who needs constant movement, new energy, or a more dynamic environment, it can start to feel a bit too quiet over time. When I say Hoi An is touristy, I really mean it. At times, you might find yourself standing in line just to cross a bridge, or slowly moving through crowded streets with hundreds of other people around you. Hoi An is beautiful, no doubt about it, but it's not for everyone long term. It asks you to slow down, to accept a simpler rhythm, and to be okay with less variety. For some people, that's exactly what they're looking for. For others, it becomes the reason they eventually move on. I personally enjoy coming here again and again, but every time I stay a bit longer, I understand more clearly what this place really offers, and why more and more foreigners still choose to stay.